Hi, my name is Ginger Wireman. I'm a community outreach and environmental education specialist with the Washington State Department of Ecology. I work in the nuclear waste program, and I educate people about Hanford cleanup. Hanford is the former Manhattan Project and military weapons production site north of the Tri-Cities. And over the years, a lot of the groundwater was contaminated and soil was contaminated. And so part of what I do is teach people about groundwater cleanup and also the connections between groundwater and the Columbia River and how we address those issues. I did not start out in environmental education. I started out in communications, and I actually had an advertising degree, and then I decided that I was really interested in protecting water resources in particular, but other environmental resources and habitat as well. I grew up in an area where I had access to a forest and a creek, and I also sailed, and so I would play in the creek in my spare time and play in the ocean on the weekends with my family. And so I could see the connections between the creek and the river and the ocean, and I learned that everything we do has an impact on both the groundwater and the surface water around us. So I thought it was important to start teaching people about how to protect water resources. One of the ways I teach about groundwater and surface water is with this model. It's an aquifer model or groundwater model, and this one has a pump, so the recharge is continuous. So if you think about your water cycle, and you've got, precipitation and groundwater storage and runoff. So this is the groundwater storage, and if you had the ability to take a cross section of the ground, like a slice of cake, and see the different layers of dirt or rock or clay layers, this might be what it looks like. So in this model, we have a confined aquifer where the water that's in this layer is separated from the water that's in this layer by a clay barrier, and in the real environment that could be a clay barrier or a solid rock layer. And the layer up here is called the unconfined aquifer because it is connected to the surface of the ground. And so if you hear the word water table, that means the top of the area that's completely saturated. So you can look at this and see where the dye is in the wells. That's the water table, the top of the saturated zone. And the water table changes over time. Sometimes you hear about people pumping too much water out of the ground, and the ground will actually subside if too much water is taken out of the ground. So this model is contaminated with food coloring. I'm going to put some more food coloring in it to demonstrate. At Hanford, historically, they actually did sometimes put contamination directly into the ground. So that's what these wells represent. This is the underground storage tank. At Hanford, we have 149 underground storage tanks, I think that's right, that held the most scary radioactive and toxic contamination. And over the years, some of those have leaked. We have septic systems at Hanford as well, but this is more of a residential thing. Another place where you might find an underground storage tank would be an old gas station. So as you see, the contamination has spread through the ground, and I'll go ahead and contaminate these other wells a little bit more. So because the recharge is continuous with this pump, it's moving the water across underground. And one of the ways that we clean the groundwater at Hanford is actually pumping the contamination out of the ground and treating it. And so there's a system called the pump and treat system that has panels with various chemical resins on them that attract the different contaminants, whether it's a radionuclide or a certain chemical that might have come out of the Hanford processing plants. So groundwater connects to the river in some cases, and it definitely connects to the river at Hanford. And if we just let this run, you'll see that the dye will eventually work its way all the way to the river. But also if there's a well down, we say down gradient, not downhill, because there may actually be an uphill place, but the layers underground may actually go downhill. So if you were down gradient from these wells that have been contaminated and you had a drinking water well, eventually that contamination could come up in your drinking water well. So if you watch this area, if I start drawing out of this well number 5, you'll see that the dye starts to actually move over and spread out. And actually, this dye here might get pulled down as well in that direction. So this is a long process, and unfortunately that's true at Hanford. We've got about 60 miles of contaminated groundwater that's contaminated more than the Safe Drinking Water Act would allow. And so we've been doing pump and treat, and the system is working, but it's a very slow process, and also we don't have there's not the chemical makeup to be able to do that for all of the different things. So sometimes you just have to wait for it to go away on its own. Like this one had the red, and it slowly is filtering. It's going to get to the river though, and we call that natural attenuation. And the study of water and how water moves through the ground or through the landscape is called hydrogeology. Hydro is water, of course, and geology is study of rocks. And so if I had studied more math in high school and junior high and had ever heard about hydrogeology, I probably would have been a hydrogeologist, because this is really fascinating to me. I'm very, very interested in how water resources affect all of us, how we can protect them, how things we do can jeopardize our water resources, can lead to contamination or degradation of habitat. So what can you do about water resources? Well, we all have choices in our everyday lives, and one of the things that's really, really easy to do to protect water resources is to clean up after your pets, and dog poop is a great one. So if I pretended that this extra dye or dog poop, it's just on the back lawn, it's no big deal, but if we have a big rain event and it floods, all that dye is going to start spreading around, and it's going to go right down the drain, and in parts of the Tri-Cities that drain is connected to the river, and in other parts of the Tri-Cities it might be connected to groundwater. So it's really important that you don't leave dog waste out, and even trying to not let your cats run around outside, make them stay inside and use a litter box. And also things like your car. If your car has an oil leak, you want to clean it up with cat litter and try to get the leak repaired so it's not going to wash off and get into the river.